Somewhere in Japan right now, a water treatment plant is purifying mine runoff that stopped being toxic enough to require treatment around 1980, except nobody updated the permit. So it still runs every day for a town that mostly is not there anymore. Somewhere else, a railway station at the northern tip of the country opens its ticket window every morning for a train that carries, on an average day, fewer passengers than the staff required to operate the station. This is not negligence. This is Japan's particular relationship with infrastructure, a deep institutional reluctance to switch anything off, to declare anything finished, to let a system built to run simply stop running because the reason for it has quietly disappeared. In this video, we are counting down 12 Japanese towns still running on autopilot, places where the machinery, the permits, and the timetables continue executing their original instructions long after the population that justified them has gone. Stay with me to the end, because number one is an entire railway line Japan kept running for over a decade for a single passenger. So, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. In the mountains of Tochigi Prefecture, a water treatment facility processes acidic drainage from the Ashio copper mine, which has not produced copper since 1973. The plant runs continuously, every single day, for over 50 years since the mine's closure, because acid mine drainage does not respect corporate timelines. Water seeping through the abandoned workings still emerges contaminated with heavy metals, even decades after anyone last extracted ore. Ashio was once the site of Japan's most notorious environmental disaster, a catastrophe that poisoned the Watarase River and became the subject of Japan's first major environmental protest movement. The mine that caused this devastation also built a town, at its peak housing tens of thousands of workers carved into the mountainside. The mine closed in 1973. The town's population continued its collapse. Today, fewer than 1,000 people live in what remains of Ashio. But the treatment plant runs without pause, an industrial-scale machine processing toxic water for a town that has shrunk to a fraction of what it once was, sustaining an environmental obligation that will likely outlast everyone currently living there. At the northernmost point of Japan's rail network, the Wakanai line terminates at a station looking across the Soya Strait toward Sakhalin, visible on clear days from the platform. The line running south passes through some of the most sparsely populated territory in Japan, a landscape of dairy farms and wind-scoured terrain where towns have been shrinking for generations. Several stations along this line now record average daily ridership in the single digits. Some exist primarily to serve a single farmhouse or a small cluster of elderly residents whose continued ability to reach medical care depends on a train that, on a purely economic basis, makes no sense to operate. Japan Railways has closed numerous lines across rural Hokkaido as population contraction makes the economics increasingly difficult to justify. But the Wakanai line has persisted, sustained partly by its symbolic significance as Japan's northernmost rail connection, and partly by the same institutional reluctance to formally terminate something not yet declared impossible. The trains run on schedule. The stations maintain platforms for a ridership that some days does not materialize at all. The Beshi copper mine in the mountains of Ehime Prefecture was, for nearly 3 centuries, the foundation of one of Japan's most significant industrial conglomerates. Discovered in 1690, the mine was operated continuously by the Sumitomo family, and the wealth it generated became the founding capital of what is today one of Japan's largest corporate groups. The mine closed in 1973 after 283 years of continuous operation, one of the longest continuously worked mining sites in recorded history. The settlements that grew up at various elevations on the mountain were abandoned in stages as the operation contracted. What remains today is an extraordinary vertical landscape of industrial archaeology. Cable car systems that once moved or down the mountain still have portions of their infrastructure intact. Processing facilities at various elevations stand empty. Sumitomo maintains a museum and heritage site at the mine, an institutional acknowledgement of where the wealth came from. Even as the mountain itself has returned to forest, the mining settlements absorbed back into the landscape they were carved from nearly 3 centuries ago. Inai Ginzan, Akita Prefecture. In the mountains of Akita Prefecture, the silver mining town of Inai Ginzan reached a population of approximately 15,000 people during the height of the Edo period, briefly one of the largest settlements in northern Japan, larger at its peak than many regional capitals that have survived into the present. The silver deposits were discovered in 1606 and worked continuously through the Edo and into the Meiji periods. The town had its own red light district, its own theaters, its own elaborate social hierarchy, all constructed in a remote mountain valley, accessible only by foot or pack-horse trails for most of its operational history. The silver played out gradually. The mine finally closed in 1954. The town that had once rivaled provincial capitals contracted to almost nothing, its population reduced to a number that today numbers in the dozens. What remains is one of the most complete archaeological records of Edo period mining settlement in Japan. Stone foundations cover the mountainside in a density that makes the scale of the former town immediately apparent to anyone who walks the site. Hitachi, Ibaraki Prefecture. On the coast of Ibaraki Prefecture, a massive industrial chimney rises 156 meters above the landscape. The Hitachi smelter chimney, completed in 1915, was at the time the tallest chimney in the world. Built to address an environmental crisis the Ashio mine had made impossible to ignore. The Hitachi copper smelting operation generated sulfur dioxide emissions that devastated surrounding agricultural land and provoked organized protest. Rather than face the kind of sustained conflict that had plagued Ashio, Hitachi's operators invested in the tallest chimney technology available, attempting to disperse emissions high enough that they would not concentrate destructively on the surroundings. The smelting operation the chimney served has long since ceased, but the chimney remains. A monument to an engineering solution to a problem industrial Japan never fully solved, merely displaced upward. The city of Hitachi transitioned successfully into electronics manufacturing, becoming the namesake of one of Japan's largest corporations. But the original mining settlements in the hills above the city have followed the pattern of mining towns everywhere. Population peak, gradual contraction, and the slow accumulation of empty buildings. Tagawa, Fukuoka Prefecture. In the Fukuoka coalfield, two massive brick chimneys rise above the town of Tagawa, surviving infrastructure of the Mitsui Tagawa coal mine, one of the largest coal mining complexes in Kyushu through the first half of the 20th century. The mine closed in 1964 as Japan's national energy transition from coal to oil accelerated across every coal field simultaneously. What makes Tagawa distinctive is the deliberate civic decision to preserve the two chimneys as monuments, a choice made while the rest of the mining infrastructure around them was demolished or left to deteriorate. The chimneys have become the defining visual symbol of Tagawa, appearing on municipal logos, an act of civic memory that consciously chose to keep a piece of the mining era standing. Tagawa's population has declined steadily since the mine's closure, following the same demographic pattern as every other Chikuho coal town. But the chimneys remain. Maintained, illuminated at night, a monument the town has chosen to keep running as a landmark. Long after the industry it commemorates stopped running as an economy. Sunkyo, Hokkaido. In the mountains of central Hokkaido, in a dramatic gorge carved by volcanic activity, the hot spring resort town of Sunkyo built substantial tourism infrastructure during the post-war decades, anchored by large hotel complexes designed to accommodate the bus tour groups that constituted the backbone of Japan's domestic tourism industry through the 1970s and 1980s. The gorge itself, with its dramatic basalt cliff formations and waterfalls, remains one of the most visually striking landscapes in Hokkaido. A genuine natural attraction that has not diminished even as the tourism industry built around it has contracted. The decline of Japan's bus tour culture left Sunkyo with hotel capacity, built for a volume that no longer materializes at the scale it once did. Several of Sunkyo's largest hotel complexes have closed or reduced operations over the past 2 decades. The town maintains a winter ice festival that draws visitors during the coldest months, a successful adaptation. But the scale of hotel infrastructure built during the bus tour era, designed for groups numbering in the hundreds, persists in a tourism economy that now arrives in smaller, more independent groups. Toyuka, Hyogo Prefecture. In the wetlands of northern Hyogo Prefecture, the city of Toyuka maintains one of the most extraordinary conservation infrastructures in Japan. A system of breeding facilities and habitat restoration zones built around a single species, the Oriental white stork, declared extinct in the wild in Japan in 1971. The stork population collapsed as agricultural modernization eliminated wetland habitat, combined with pesticide use that damaged the food chain. By the time the last wild Japanese stork died in 1971, Toyuka had already begun a captive breeding program using birds from Russia, an effort that would take decades to show results. The infrastructure is substantial. Artificial nesting platforms, a network of rice paddies cultivated using stork-friendly methods that sacrifice efficiency to maintain the food web, monitoring stations, and a visitor center drawing conservation tourists. The first storks were reintroduced in 2005. The population has grown slowly since, but the human population of the surrounding farming communities maintaining these practices has continued its decades-long decline, leaving the conservation infrastructure increasingly dependent on a shrinking number of farmers. Inoshima, Hiroshima, prefecture on a small island in the Seto Inland Sea, The shipbuilding town of Inoshima built an industrial identity around a craft tradition stretching back to the medieval period, when the island was home to the Murakami pirates, a maritime power whose naval expertise eventually transitioned into legitimate shipbuilding as Japan modernized. By the 20th century, Inoshima's shipyards had become a significant center of Japanese maritime construction, employing thousands of workers. The industry sustained the island's economy through most of the post-war boom, building vessels for Japan's expanding merchant fleet. Japan's shipbuilding industry faced intense competitive pressure from the 1990s onward as South Korean and then Chinese shipyards captured market share through lower labor costs. Inoshima's shipyards contracted and consolidated, leaving dry docks and crane infrastructure built to construct vessels at a scale the remaining workforce can no longer sustain. The island's population has declined as shipbuilding employment contracted. What remains is an island where the maritime industrial infrastructure, the massive cranes and dry docks visible from the bridges connecting Inoshima to the mainland, continues operating at a fraction of its designed capacity. Kinkasan, Miyagi Prefecture. Off the coast of the Oshika Peninsula in Miyagi Prefecture, the small island of Kinkasan has been a site of Buddhist and Shinto religious significance for over 1,200 years. Home to a temple complex operating continuously since the 8th century, maintaining a population of sacred deer considered messengers of the mountain's enshrined deity. The island has never had a conventional civilian population. Its residents have always been religious staff, monks, shrine keepers, and support staff required to maintain the temple complex and accommodate pilgrims who have visited for over a millennium. This makes Kinkasan's demographic trajectory different from every other location in this video, contracting not from industrial collapse, but from the broader decline in religious vocation affecting temples across Japan. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami struck Kinkasan directly, damaging structures and disrupting pilgrimage routes. Recovery has been slow, complicated by demographic pressures affecting the mainland communities that once supplied Kinkasan with pilgrims and personnel. The temple continues to operate, maintaining centuries of unbroken practice with a staff contracted to a fraction of its historical size. The deer roaming grounds in numbers that sometimes exceed the human population maintaining the institution. Akan-Kawayu, Hokkaido. In the volcanic landscape of eastern Hokkaido within Akan-Mashu National Park, the hot spring resort towns of Akanko Onsen and Kawayu Onsen developed substantial tourism infrastructure around dramatic volcanic scenery, caldera lakes, and the distinctive Marimo algae formations found in Lake Akan. The bus tour decline struck Akan-Kawayu with particular force, given the region's remoteness and historical dependence on large coordinated tour groups rather than independent travelers. Hotels built to accommodate tour bus capacity, with dining halls and bath facilities scaled for groups numbering in the hundreds, have faced occupancy rates that leave significant portions of their built capacity unused on most nights. The natural attractions remain genuinely extraordinary. The volcanic landscape has not diminished. The Marimo formations, found in few other locations on Earth, continue their slow growth undisturbed. But the resort infrastructure built during Japan's tourism boom decades persists in a contracted form, running at a fraction of designed capacity, sustained by a tourism industry that has fundamentally restructured around smaller, more independent travel patterns. The Snow Festival Line. Japan's last train for one. We have spent this video counting down infrastructure that continues running long after the population that justified it has contracted. We end with the most extreme example Japan has to offer. For several years on the Hokkaido rural rail network, a specific train stop became known internationally as the station JR, kept open for a single high school student, reportedly servicing a schedule timed precisely to her commute, with plans to formally close the station only after her graduation. The exact details of this story have been disputed and clarified over the years, with rail enthusiasts noting the situation was more complicated than the viral narrative suggested. But the underlying reality is not in dispute. Across Hokkaido's rural network, JR has operated services where ridership has contracted to single digits, where individual stations exist because closing them would mean abandoning specific named residents with no alternative way to reach school or medical care. This is Autopilot taken to its logical extreme. Not a system that forgot the population is gone, but one that knows exactly how many people depend on it, and continues anyway. The trains run. The chimneys stand illuminated. Japan does not turn things off. It lets them run until someone finally makes the decision the silence has been avoiding for decades.